What happens when the person sweeping your lobby knows more about your company's heart than your top manager? Darren Vellman leaned back from his desk, staring at the spreadsheet glowing on his laptop. 18 locations, and yet this one store 13 kept catching his eye. Low employee retention, a drop in customer reviews, and an oddly sharp uptick in refunded orders. It had been 7 years since Darren bought the fast casual sandwich chain from the original founders. He'd worked like hell to grow it, and it paid off. The brand expanded quickly, became recognizable. But he always feared getting too far removed from the ground level. Lately, with more meetings and less field time, that fear had started to feel real. He'd never been to Store 13 in person. It was in a lower income area on the edge of town and had cycled through 4 store managers in 2 years. The current one, a guy named Nick, had been there 6 months. Nick's reports were always neat, always glowing. A little too glowing. Darren pushed his chair back and stood. Time to see it for myself. He had a disguise guy, same one who helped his friend run an Undercover CEO series on YouTube a while back. They gave Darren a full makeover, trimmed his graying beard down, added a mustache, dyed his hair darker, gave him thick black-rimmed glasses. He wore a faded hoodie, jeans, and a cheap baseball cap. No one would peg him for a CEO. He entered Store 13 the next morning pretending to be a new hire named Dan. It was a corporate chain, and with their constant turnover, it wasn't strange no one recognized him. He'd never met the current staff. HR had helped arrange his transfer from a closed location. Nick, the manager, greeted him with a clipped nod. You'll be doing prep work and janitorial the next few days. We're short-staffed. How come? People complain too much or call out. I don't have time for excuses, Nick said, already walking off. The place was busy. A mix of high school kids dropping in, blue-collar workers on lunch, and a few regulars who clearly came daily. Darren noticed the line moved slow, orders were often wrong, and some employees seemed tense. Behind the scenes, it was worse. The kitchen floor was slick with spilled soda syrup no one cleaned up. Half the crew looked tired, and not just from the work. Nobody smiled. When a younger employee dropped a tray, Nick barked across the kitchen, "Are you dumb or just lazy?" Darren flinched. The kid, maybe 17, mumbled an apology and cleaned it up in silence. By lunch, Darren was sweating from cleaning tables and hauling boxes in the back. He bumped into a girl in the walk-in fridge, maybe early 20s, petite, dark curls tucked under her cap. She glanced at him. "You're the new guy?" "Yeah, Dan. I'm Brielle. I'll warn you now, don't let Nick catch you talking too long. He'll dock your hours." "Good to know," Darren said. "You been here a while?" 3 years. Feels longer. He caught a look in her eyes, something worn down but still holding on. Later, around 2:30, the lunch rush died. Darren was wiping tables when he saw something through the side window. One of the employees, an older woman with gray streaks in her hair, was sitting outside on the curb, sharing a sandwich with a teen boy. The kid looked rough. Torn jacket, scuffed shoes, skinny. But he was smiling as he talked to her. She broke the sandwich in half and handed him the bigger piece. Darren stepped closer to the window, heart thudding. Nick stepped out of the kitchen, saw Darren standing there. "You done with the lobby?" "Almost," Darren said. Nick glanced outside. "That's Jean. She does this every week. Wastes food on strays." "Strays?" Darren said, voice low. Nick shrugged. "Kids always hanging around. Not our problem." Jean returned inside a few minutes later, humming softly to herself. Darren made a mental note. She hadn't clocked out. She'd given her lunch away. That night, Darren sat in his car for a long time before heading home. The image of that boy's face, grateful, tired, but alive, wouldn't leave him. He came back the next day, this time more determined. Something was off here. The manager was a bully, the crew was burned out, and a woman was feeding a hungry kid with her own lunch while management called him a stray. He wasn't just going to watch. Not anymore. Darren showed up early the next morning, just before the doors unlocked. The air still held a chill, and the parking lot was nearly empty except for a dented sedan parked near the dumpster. He recognized it from yesterday. It belonged to Jean. She was already inside, restocking the drink station in silence. No one else had arrived yet. She didn't notice him at first. He stepped inside, careful not to startle her. "Morning." Jean glanced over, startled for just a second, then nodded. "You're early. Couldn't sleep?" He walked over, started helping her unwrap the stacks of lids and straws. "You always open up alone?" She didn't answer right away. "Nick's supposed to be here by now. Usually shows up late. Or not at all." The door swung open minutes later. Nick entered, holding a to-go cup from a different coffee shop and tapping at his phone. Without looking up, he said, "Jean, you need to redo last night's closeout numbers. They didn't add up." She didn't argue, just nodded and went to the back. Nick turned to Darren. "You a Dan, right?" "Yeah. Trash duty. Check the outside bins before the morning rush." Darren headed out, but not before catching the coffee Nick carried. The logo didn't belong to their chain. That meant he'd stopped somewhere else, likely driving past his own store's opening time without a second thought. Outside, the bins were full. Bags sagged over the sides, and one had torn open, leaking soda-stained cardboard and pickle slices onto the pavement. He grabbed gloves from the side closet and got to work. By the time he returned inside, customers were trickling in. The kitchen was running with just two people, Brielle and a tall guy named Matteo, who barely spoke and moved like he was running on fumes. Darren stepped behind the counter to help. Brielle handed him a stack of paper food trays. "Make sure the sandwich paper lines up before you wrap it. Nick flips if it's crooked." He nodded. "You always this busy with just two in the back?" "Usually. Sometimes one of us calls in and he doesn't cover. Says it teaches us to be reliable." Darren didn't reply. He watched Matteo shuffle between the grill and prep station. The kid's shoulders sagged, his eyes red-rimmed. At one point, he leaned on the counter just a second too long. Nick's voice was sharp. "You want a nap, go home. Or stay and work. Pick one." Matteo straightened, jaw tight. "I'm good." "Then act like it." The rush didn't let up. By 10:30, the lobby was full. Jean moved between tables quietly, wiping surfaces and refilling the napkin dispensers. A woman with two kids came in and asked if they could split a combo meal. Jean nodded and offered extra water cups. Nick caught it from the register. "Don't give away product. They either pay or they leave." Jean stepped back like she'd been slapped. "They didn't ask for anything free." "I heard you. Don't make me repeat myself." Darren stepped in. "They were asking for cups." Nick turned. "You don't speak for this store. You're on week one." "I was just clarifying." Nick stared for a second too long. "You got a problem with how I run things?" "No," Darren said calmly. "Just trying to help." Nick walked off without replying. Later, during a lull, Darren caught up with Matteo near the cooler. "You look beat." "Long shift." Matteo shrugged. "Worked a double yesterday. Got called in early today." "You say anything?" "What's the point?" he muttered. "If I call out, I lose hours next week. If I show up tired, he tells me I'm lazy." Darren looked at him. "You live nearby?" "Bus ride. 40 minutes. He paused. "I'm saving for school. Welding program. But I gotta work full-time to help out at home." That landed hard. Darren gave a short nod. "Respect." Matteo offered a tired smile. "Just trying to get through it." By noon, things spiraled. The register froze mid-transaction and Nick didn't know how to reset it. He snapped at Brielle, who tried to explain the manual override steps. When she offered to take over, he barked, "I don't need a cashier telling me how to manage." She stepped back, jaw clenched. Customers waited. One woman asked for a manager. Nick ignored her, muttering to himself. Darren stepped behind the line, quietly walking Brielle through the reset. She tapped the right sequence and got the register working again. Nick saw it as it rebooted. "You just love showing off, huh?" Brielle didn't answer. Next time I need help, I'll ask. Until then, keep your hands off the system." She turned away, her face unreadable. At break, Darren found Jean outside again. This time, the teen boy was back, same scuffed shoes, same thin frame. They sat on the curb, talking quietly. He waited until Jean stood up and the kid jogged off. "That your son?" Jean shook her head. "No. He's from the shelter 2 blocks over. His mom works nights. They don't have much." "You've known him long?" "Almost a year. He checks in when he can. I give him a sandwich if there's extra." "He ever asked for money?" "Never." Darren nodded. "You ever get in trouble for it?" "Nick said I'd be written up if I did it again. But I'm not letting that boy go hungry. Write me up. Fire me, I don't care." He respected that deeply. The next 2 hours were a quiet storm. One of the kitchen coolers stopped working. Brielle reported it. Nick waved it off. "It's fine. Just keep the door shut." "It's not holding temp," she said. "It's fine." Food sat inside for over an hour. Darren checked the internal thermometer. It read 49 degrees. He looked at Brielle. "That's not safe." She nodded. "I know. But he doesn't care." Darren stepped into the back and found Nick in the closet office, staring at his phone. "Cooler's at 49. That's a health risk." Nick didn't look up. "Then don't open it." "That's not how it works." Nick finally looked at him. "Look, you're new. Maybe you're used to cushy stores. This one's different. We don't have time for whining." "It's not whining. It's food safety." Nick stood full height. "You want to run this place? Be my guest." He walked out, leaving Darren staring at the wall. By closing, Brielle had stayed 2 hours past her shift unpaid. Mateo had nearly dropped a tray from exhaustion. Jean slipped an extra cookie into a child's bag when no one was looking. Darren had seen enough. The next morning, he returned not as Dan but as himself. Corporate HR and 2 regional managers waited outside with him. They entered together at opening. Nick was behind the counter sipping coffee. He blinked when he saw Darren walk in with a suit and clipboard. "You again?" he said. Darren stepped forward. "I'm Darren Vellman, CEO." Nick's face drained. "I've been working here for the last 3 days. I've seen how this place runs. How you run it." The room went still. Jean froze mid-step. Brielle's eyes widened. Mateo stood in the back doorway, silent. "You've ignored safety protocols, berated your staff, and punished employees for acts of basic human decency." Nick opened his mouth. You're done." He turned to HR. "Terminate his employment effective immediately." Nick stepped back. "You can't, I can. And I just did." Security escorted Nick out without another word. Darren turned to the crew. "We're doing things differently starting now." Darren stood in the middle of the lobby, the weight of the moment pressing down like a held breath. The staff hadn't moved. Brielle's hand still held a receipt she had been folding unconsciously. Jean leaned slightly against a mop handle, her eyes on Darren but unreadable. Mateo had stepped halfway out of the kitchen, uncertain if he should be where he was or keep working. Darren spoke calmly. "I know this is a lot. I'll explain everything. But first, I need you all to know I didn't come here to embarrass anyone. I came because something wasn't adding up, and I needed to see it with my own eyes." He gestured toward the door. "Now that I have, things are going to change." He turned to the 2 regional managers who had remained silent until now. "We'll handle the paperwork in the office. In the meantime, I want the team to take a seat. We're closing for the next few hours." Brielle blinked. "We're shutting the store?" "Just for the morning. You've earned a break." Mateo hesitated. "Are we still getting paid?" Darren looked at him directly. "Yes. Full shift." The crew slowly made their way to the booths. Darren watched as they sat without speaking. Not because they didn't care, but because they had learned not to expect this kind of attention. Darren and the 2 regional managers stepped behind the counter and into the back office. Inside, an overflowing drawer of printed schedules, a coffee-stained keyboard, and a broken chair greeted them. Darren didn't sit. He pointed to the terminal. Start pulling Nick's personnel files. I want to know how he got through hiring with this pattern of behavior. And check the schedule logs. If anyone was clocked out while still working, I want names and times. One of the managers, a woman named Alina, opened the file system. Should we notify legal? I already did, Darren replied. They'll be reviewing every termination and write-up from the past year. He didn't wait for a response. He left the office and returned to the front where the staff still sat. The store was silent aside from the hum of the drink machine. All right, he began, resting his hands against the edge of a booth. I want to hear from each of you. If you're willing. Jean shifted slightly. You already saw what it was like. I did, Darren said. But that doesn't mean I know everything. And I don't want to guess. Mateo leaned forward, elbows on the table. It wasn't always like this. When I started 2 years ago, we had a good crew. The manager before Nick, she listened. She covered when someone was sick. But turnover got bad, and after she left, it just got worse. Brielle picked up from there. Nick. He didn't yell every day. At first, he was cold but manageable. Then hours started disappearing. He'd say the system glitched. We'd check our pay, and it'd be short. A few of us spoke up. He told us to go find other jobs if we didn't like it. Jean added quietly, he took away my closing shifts after I said something about the cooler temperature. Told me older folks couldn't keep up. Darren's expression hardened. He said that. She nodded, folding her hands in her lap. I'd worked evenings for years. He switched me to mid-mornings. Said my energy wasn't right for the dinner crowd. Alina, who had followed Darren out, scribbled something on a legal pad. Darren turned to Brielle. I noticed you handling a lot of tasks outside your role. Have you been officially trained for those? Not really. I picked it up because there was no one else. I figured if I didn't, we'd get more complaints or someone would get hurt. Did he ever offer to promote you? She gave a dry laugh. He said I was too intense for leadership, that I'd make people nervous. Darren didn't respond to that. He walked a few paces, then turned back. And the boy outside? Jean's voice didn't waver. His name's Evan. His mom works the night shift at a warehouse. He comes by because it's safer here than being alone. I give him food because I have extra. That's it. No one's questioning your judgment, Darren said. You did what was right. I'm sorry you were made to feel that wasn't the case. He paused. I want you all to take the rest of the day off. You'll be paid for a full shift. Tomorrow, we open with a new interim manager. We'll be hiring a permanent one with your input. Mateo frowned. You want us to help pick the new manager? Yes. You've seen what works. What doesn't? You'll sit in on interviews if you're willing. Jean looked at him for a long moment. You're serious. I am. Brielle leaned forward. And what about the pay issues? The missing hours? Every clock record will be audited. If hours were removed, you'll be paid retroactively. With interest. And any employee who left in the past year for similar reasons will be contacted. Mateo rubbed at his eyes. Feels like. Too much almost. No, Darren said. This is what should have been done the moment any of you raised concerns. I failed by not seeing it sooner. He gave them each a look. I'm not asking for trust overnight. I'm asking for a chance to earn it back. They didn't say anything at first. But none of them stood to leave either. That afternoon, Darren had a cleaning service brought in to deep sanitize the equipment. The cooler was serviced and replaced. A safety inspector arrived without being asked. Darren had called them personally. In the back office, they found a drawer filled with unsigned performance warnings. Some had employees' names misspelled. Others were dated on days the employees weren't even scheduled. Alina held one up. He was building a paper trail. In case someone complained. Darren nodded. Make digital copies of everything. Send the originals to legal. By late afternoon, the store was reset. The signage was freshened, damaged chairs replaced, and a new employee board was installed. This one blank, waiting for photos of the staff, not just management. Before leaving, Darren stopped by the bus stop outside the store. Evan was sitting on the bench, backpack hugged to his chest. He looked up when Darren approached. You work there? The boy asked. I do now. You're not like the guy before. I hope not. Evan stared at the sidewalk. Jean's nice. Sometimes she gives me a sandwich. She told me. I don't ask. I just wait. She always knows. Darren nodded. She's a good person. She said you helped her today. I tried. The boy stood up, adjusting the strap on his backpack. She said people like you don't come around much. I'm trying to change that. Evan gave a small nod, then walked off toward the shelter. Darren watched him go. When he returned to his car, he sat for a long time, staring out at the store. He had built a company, but somewhere along the way, it had started drifting off course. All the metrics and reports didn't show what really mattered: the people inside the walls, the ones holding everything together. Tomorrow he'd be back at headquarters, but he wouldn't be sitting in his office. He had 16 other stores to visit, and this time he wouldn't be sending someone else. By the following Monday, the store reopened under a quiet but watchful atmosphere. Word had spread, not just that Nick was gone, but that the CEO had been working shoulder to shoulder with the staff just days before. Darren hadn't made a public announcement or sent out a memo. He didn't need to. The crew spoke for him. The temporary manager, a level-headed operations lead named Carla, arrived just before sunrise. She had been handpicked by Darren and briefed thoroughly. She didn't come in barking orders or throwing her title around. She walked the store with a notebook, asked questions, listened, and made clear from the first hour that no one was getting ignored under her watch. The crew was smaller than ideal. Brielle, Jean, and Mateo were still the core. A second prep cook had been transferred from another location, and Carla filled in the gaps when needed. Darren returned that morning, not undercover this time, but in worn jeans and a plain polo. He didn't carry a clipboard or bark instructions. He grabbed a pair of gloves and started wiping down the front windows. Brielle approached him between customers, holding a half-cleaned receipt printer in one hand. Her voice was quieter than usual. I still don't know what to call you. I mean, I've been calling you Dan for a week. Darren works fine, he said, not looking up from the glass. Or just, hey you. I'll answer to either. She gave a short laugh, the first real one he'd heard from her. You're actually sticking around? For now. I've got a few more shifts here before I move on. You're doing this at other stores? Every single one. She leaned her shoulder against the window frame, looking out toward the street. You think any of them are worse than this one was? I don't know, but I didn't expect to find what I did here, so I'm not making assumptions. Inside, Jean was at the register, talking to a customer Darren hadn't seen before. A man in his early 40s, broad-shouldered with a quiet presence. He handed her a 20, then glanced around before asking something low enough that Darren couldn't hear. Jean pointed toward the kitchen and the man nodded and stepped aside. Moments later, he was standing at the prep line, watching Mateo assemble a sandwich. Darren approached, wiping his hands on a towel. You looking for someone? He asked. The man turned. Mateo's dad. He told me what happened. I just wanted to say thank you. You don't owe me that. I think I do. My son doesn't ask for help. Never has. But when he came home talking about how someone finally stood up for them in there, he trailed off, watching Mateo work. That matters. Darren nodded once. He's got a strong head on his shoulders. The man looked at him directly. He's been carrying more than he should. I didn't know how bad it was. You're here now. The man gave a small nod, then stepped away to wait for Mateo to finish. Later that afternoon, Carla gathered the team in the back room not for a meeting, but for a check-in. She'd brought sandwiches from a neighboring cafe, paid for out of pocket. No speeches, she said. Just food and a few updates. Mateo sat with his arms resting on the table, eyes heavier than usual but more at ease. Brielle leaned back in her chair, chewing slowly while Jean sipped from a paper cup, her posture relaxed. Carla opened a folded sheet of paper. First, back pay has been processed. You'll see it in your accounts by Friday. That includes all unpaid hours for the last 90 days. Legal is still reviewing the records before that. Mateo raised an eyebrow. We're getting it all? Everything that's verifiable. And if you remember anything specific that's not in the system, write it down. We'll compare it with the video logs and paper schedules. Jean looked up. You're going through video? Darren stepped closer from the corner where he'd been leaning. Every camera archive from the last year. We're not relying on Nick's records. Brielle set her sandwich down. Feels weird, like it should take longer to fix. It'll take time to rebuild, Darren said. But accountability can't wait. Carla unfolded another sheet. Second item. We're opening applications for the permanent manager role. And I meant what I said. Any of you interested will get priority interviews and I'll be sitting in on all of them. Brielle raised an eyebrow. Even if we've never managed before? Especially if you haven't, Carla said. We want to grow people who know how to lead from experience, not just manager titles. Jean glanced around the table. Feels like the first time someone's asked us what we want. Darren met her gaze. I didn't come to fix a store. I came to listen to the people holding it up. The next morning, Evan showed up again. This time, Jean wasn't alone when she greeted him. Carla had already prepared a sandwich, wrapped and bagged, and handed it over without a word. Evan hesitated, confused. Brielle crouched beside him. You're good. It's already taken care of. He glanced at Jean, who gave him a quiet nod. Thanks, he said, gripping the bag like it might disappear. Mateo leaned against the counter, watching. You get to eat first today, he said. Evan smiled for the first time and sat near the back window, away from the bustle. As the week went on, the store's rhythm changed. Carla adjusted the schedule to ensure no one worked more than 5 consecutive days. Breaks were enforced, not requested. When the fryer malfunctioned, repairs were ordered within the hour. No debates, no delays. And customers started noticing. A woman left a handwritten note folded in a napkin, thanking the staff for finally making this place feel alive again. By Friday, Darren stood at the register watching Brielle guide a new hire through the digital ordering system. She moved with calm precision, explaining just enough without overwhelming. The kid, barely 16, nodded, tapping the screen carefully. She's doing well, Carla said, stepping beside him. She should be running this place. She might. Darren turned. You think she'll apply? She already did. First one in. He smiled, not with pride, but with relief. Let me know when the interviews start. I'll sit in. As the lobby filled again, Darren walked to the back, where Jean was unpacking a delivery order. She glanced up. You're really leaving tomorrow? Yeah. You'll be back. Not undercover. But yes, I will. She nodded. Good. We'll hold you to that. He stepped outside as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. Evan was walking away from the store, his backpack a little fuller than before. He waved once without turning around. Darren stood quietly watching. This wasn't about sandwiches or schedules. It was about what kind of place people came to every day and what they carried home when they left. It was about whether they were seen. And now, for the first time in a long time, they were. He pulled out his phone, opened the store list, and tapped the next location. 1 down. 17 to go.